Let's get you started with Vectorworks. I'll be using Vectorworks 2025 for these tutorials. The user interface, the icons, the menu layout, etc. has changed a lot in the last few versions between Vectorworks 2022 and 24. There's also a dark mode that you might be in by default. None of that matters. This is all just sort of aesthetics. I'm going to stick with the light mode for these videos because it's a little easier to see on the screen, I think. But you can change those modes in the preferences later. When you first open Vectorworks in a lab setting, you will likely see this splash screen appear prompting you to enter a server address. If it doesn't automatically detect the server, you may need to type in the address I've graded out here, professor or your lab manager or whatever. If you're working from home on your own laptop with your own version, you won't see this. And if you're using the educational license, then check that you've selected the design suite from the modules dropdown. If you've purchased Vectorworks fundamentals without the other workspaces, you should still be able to follow along with these first tutorials, as we're going to stick to the basic tools and work in 2D. In current versions, the next thing you will see is this home screen where you can open up recent projects or start a new project. We're going to click on the blue button in the top left to start a new project. In this first video, I'm going to show you how to set up the Spotlight workspace, use the page setup to format our document, and change the scale of the drawing. And I'll also show you the essential navigation tools as we go. First, let's take a look at what's on the screen. At the top, there's a menu bar like you'll find in most programs. This is where you'll find commands like save, new, print, import, export, etc., as well as special commands that we'll get to later. Just below that is the view bar, and this is one of the areas that's changed a lot from previous versions. This row of tools generally controls what you see in the workspace, which layers and classes are visible, how images are drawn on the screen, as well as the snapping tools that used to be down in the lower right-hand corner. They've moved up over here as well. We're going to take a closer look at the view bar soon. Below the view bar is the mode bar, and the buttons and fields in this row change depending on whatever tool you have selected. Basically, if you want to change the way a tool is working, or its settings, or its mode, you're going to want to look at the mode bar. Now, taking up most of the screen is the design workspace where we're going to do our drawings, and we're going to come back to that very soon. Off to the sides are several essential palettes, and these palettes are currently docked, but you can arrange the palettes or drag them wherever you want on the screen. But before we do that, let's change the workspace from the design suite to the Spotlight workspace. So the design suite in the educational version or the full professional version has far more tools than we need. There's all kinds of parking space tools and landscape tools and whatever. We're just going to switch to the Spotlight workspace, which will focus on the tools that we will likely need for entertainment design. And you can always switch to a different workspace at any time with no harm to your current project. You can just jump into a different workspace, borrow one of those tools from that industry, change whatever you want, and then just change back to your preferred workspace with no harm done. And advanced users can even create their own custom workspaces with tools, palettes, and hotkeys, and you can have it set up exactly how you want every time you open the program. So find the Tools menu at the top of your screen, and when you select the Tools menu, look at the very bottom of the pop-out menu for Workspaces. Now, if you're using a laptop with a very small screen, it's possible that Vectorworks has split up the menu into two columns, so you may need to look to the right-hand column to find Workspaces. But either way, down toward the bottom, you're going to find Workspaces. Pop up, open that side panel, and simply select the Spotlight workspace from that list. Just selecting that will switch you over to the Spotlight workspace. The screen will withdraw for a moment, and when it's finished, there'll be a few subtle changes to the workspace. And the easiest way to check that you're in the Spotlight workspace is to look at the menus across the top of the screen. If you see one named Spotlight up there next to Tools, then you've made the switch. And Vectorworks will stay in this workspace from now on, unless you switch to a different workspace in future. Now let's look closer at these palettes. In the top left, you should see the basic tools. Most of what we'll be working on for these first tutorials will be found here. And notice that you can hover over any icon and see a tooltip pop up with the name of the tool and a brief description. This little snapshot help will appear over just about anything you want to hover over in the program. It can be super useful when you're learning it. Let's find the Attributes palette down here. It's currently docked, but let's make it a floating palette to give us some more room in our design workspace. Simply hover your cursor over the title bar of this or any other palette, and click and drag it toward the center of your screen to tear it off of the dock. And now it will stay where you've placed it until you move again, even after restarting the software. You can even drag palettes onto additional monitors if you have more than one. The attributes palette is very useful when we're setting our line weights and fills, but a lot of the time we just don't need it taking up space. If you're using a PC, then find the little thumbtack in the title bar and click it so that it's sideways. On a Mac, you'll want to click the yellow dot. And now when you move your cursor away from the palette, it shuts the drawer. To open it again, just simply hover over the title bar and the palette will open. And you can click the thumbtack or the dot again to keep it in the open position. Go ahead and park the attributes palette up in the upper left corner of the workspace and let's leave it closed. And we'll use it again soon. But what happens if you accidentally hit the close X or the red dot? Any palette that you want on the screen can be found in the Windows menu in the top of the screen. So find the Windows menu and open that and you'll see palettes near the top of that list. Pop open that flyout palette and you'll see all of the palettes available in the software in this list. And if there's a check to the left of the name, then it's open somewhere on the screen. Notice the top palette Object Info has a check. And if we look over in the upper right here, we can see it's right there, Object Info. To reopen a hidden palette or an accidentally closed palette, simply select it in the list. And notice that the location and even the auto hide settings are remembered. And just be aware that a palette might be hiding behind another one on the screen, or you may have moved it to a second monitor if you have one of those. If you're really hurting for screen space on a tiny monitor, you can probably close the navigation window, as we won't be using that for the first few videos, and most of what it does can be accessed up in the view bar, but I'm going to leave mine open for now, but it's up to you. If you want to dock a palette, click and drag its title bar in the direction of where you would like to dock it. And you get these little blue guides that appear letting you decide where to place the dock palette. We can also very easily change the shape of the palette simply by placing our cursor on the edge of the palettes. And notice that the arrow turns into two small arrows pointing away from each other. If you click and drag when you see this icon, you can shrink or expand the palettes. Here I'm pushing the basic tool sets in a little tighter, and then I'm finding the horizontal break between the two palettes and pushing the border down a bit so that I can see all the basic tool icons, but I don't have a lot of wasted space. Now, this is optional, of course, but having plenty of room in the design workspace is very handy. We're going to start drawing in the next video, but first let's set up our drawing and its scale. Notice that there's a gray rectangle there on the screen. That is the default 8.5 by 11 portrait piece of paper that your printer probably uses. We're going to draw our door flat onto an 11 by 17 landscape tabloid-sized sheet of paper. To change the size and orientation of your paper, find the File menu and the Page Settings, just like you're going to find in any tool that has a print function. So File, Page Setup. And then in this window, notice that the Show Page Boundary is checked, and that's why we can see the gray outline of the paper on our design layer. If you don't want to see that gray box, for example, if you're creating a 3D model of an object in the future, you can deselect this box and it'll hide that outline. But let's leave it on while we're working in 2D, as it's a good idea to know where the edge of our paper is. I'm going to check Show Page Breaks for a moment just so you can see what that does. I'm also leaving Show Watermarks on. If you're using the educational version, the watermark will be automatically added to any document that is opened using an academic license, even if the document was created with a professional licensed version of Vectorworks. Simply opening a file will add that watermark to it. It's a good idea to keep it on while we draw so we don't put any important information under where the watermark will be printed. Let's change the paper by checking Choose Size Unavailable in Printer Setup. This allows you to select any size paper you want, regardless of what your printer can handle or even if you have a printer. From the drop-down, select ASMEB, that's the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, Plate B, MZB, which is 11 by 17 in landscape. Notice that the width and height has changed to 17 wide by 11 high. That gives us our landscape layout. But when I close the window and see the screen, the page breaks show that Vectorworks has decided that it's going to need 6 pieces of paper to print this out on 11 by 8.5 by 11. And that's because most printers need a bit of margin around the edges of the paper. They don't print right to the edge of the paper. So to fix this, I'm going to go back to File and Page Setup again here, and I'm just going to knock off 1/2 inch from the drawing edge. That's a bit more than we actually need to subtract, but it's close enough and it's easy to remember. So set the width to 16.5 and the height to 10.5. So now we've given ourselves basically 1/4 inch all the way around. You can also deselect show page breaks as well, so you don't have that gray line down the middle of your drawing. I'm going to leave mine on for a moment so you can see what has happened. By shrinking the drawing slightly, Vectorworks is comfortable that it will only take 2 portrait pieces of letter-sized paper, 8.5 by 11, to print this 11 by 17 landscape drawing. And the nice thing is that if you don't have access to a large printer, Vectorworks will automatically tile the prints for you on smaller paper. I'm going to go back to File and Page Setup one more time just to turn off show page breaks. Lastly, let's talk about scale and a little bit about navigating in the workspace. I'm going to use the rectangle tool to draw a box in the center of the screen, and then use the dimension tool and add a dimension line. Notice what it says. Now, let's look at the zoom and scale section of the view bar. Zoom is only for what's on your screen, how zoomed it is you are into your drawing. It doesn't have any effect on the drawing when you hit print. These 2 buttons can be very helpful when you're getting the hang of navigating. The first is Fit to Page Area. And when you click on this, no matter how zoomed in or out or lost in the workspace you are, it will fill your workspace with the full page. It's kind of like clicking your ruby slippers to take you back home. The next button is Fit to Objects. Notice that I have the rectangle selected when I click on this button. And when I click it, Vectorworks will zoom in or out in order to fit the whole selected object or multiple objects onto the screen. And remember, this is just helping you navigate in the workspace. If we want to actually change the scale of the drawing, we need to use the Layer Scale button to the right. It looks like it has a little ruler on it. If you click on that, it opens the Layer Scale dialog box. And notice that by default, our document is 1/4 inch to the foot, meaning that for every 1/4 inch on the printed document, it will equal 1 foot of real world scale. We use 1/4 inch scale a lot in entertainment design, but for our first drawing, we can zoom in a bit. So find and click on the radio button next to the 1 inch scale. And notice that our paper scale has changed from 1 to 48 in 1/4 inch to 1 to 12. So for every inch on the paper, that will equal 12 inches or 1 foot in full scale. And by the way, if you ever want to work in full scale for 3D printing or some other use, just check the 1-to-1 button under Metric and Engineering. Click the OK button and notice what's happened to the rectangle. The dimension hasn't changed, but the box has tripled in size on the screen. If we printed now and then placed a scale ruler on the 1 inch to the foot gauge against the rectangle, we would read the same scale dimension. And that's the beauty of CAD. You never have to do the math or fumble with a scale ruler. You just simply enter the full size dimensions of what you want, and Vectorworks takes care of the scale for you. But you can change scales anytime you want. And how do you know what's the right scale to use? Basically, it's all about how large is the thing you are drawing and what is the size of your paper. We typically use 1/8, 1/4, 1/2 inch, and 1 inch scaled plates in architecture and entertainment design. But if you want to draw the object as big as you can on the piece of paper, you just want to pick the right size for that. So for example, say you're drawing a hand prop on tabloid 11 by 17 paper, then maybe 3 inch to the foot or even full scale might be fine depending on how big the prop is. But if you're drawing a light plot for a huge arena stage, you might need a 36 by 24 inch architecture D size plate in 1/4 inch or even 1/8 inch to the foot scale. For our door flat, 11 by 17 paper in 1 inch to the foot will work fine, although scenic elevations are typically drawn in 1/2 inch. To zoom in and out in your drawing, simply place the cursor roughly where you want to zoom in, and you use your mouse's scroll wheel to zoom in or out. For a PC, you'll likely scroll up to zoom in and down to back out. On a Mac, this might be reversed. Hold the spacebar down and click and drag with your left mouse button to pan the drawing. And notice that the cursor has changed to a hand. There's a hand tool in the basic tool sets if you want to move around without holding down the spacebar, but simply pressing the spacebar and left click dragging is fine for moving around your drawing usually. And there are other navigational commands when we move into 3D, but for now, the scroll wheel and the spacebar will do most of what you need for 2D. And one last thing to keep an eye on, if you have a full-size keyboard with a 10-key number pad off on the side, that can be very handy for navigating in 3D, but if you have the number lock on and you accidentally bump one of those numbers, you might move into a 3D view. So notice when I hit the 3 key on my full-size number pad, the rectangle now now looks like a diamond. And that's because I've moved into a right isometric view, and I'm now looking at my drawing from a 45-degree angle. And notice too that the screen background has shifted from beige to a kind of a slight green. That lets you know that you've moved into a 3D view. And we'll talk about what all the buttons do or how to navigate in 3D if you don't have a full-size keyboard with a number pad on that in a future tutorial. For now, just know that you want to be in top plan whenever possible, and hitting the 0 key on that number pad will just bring you back into top plan, or you can reach up in here into the view menu and select top plan from this drop down. Either of those will be fine. You can and will draw in 3D views, but when you're just starting it can be confusing, so let's keep it simple and stay in top plan for now. So Control or Command S to save, or go to the file menu and save your document with whatever name you want, and in the next video we're going to actually start drawing.